All right, Ellen, should we get started?
Yeah.
I think we have a lot of introductions to do. So go ahead.
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, do you want me to do this or do you want to do it? Because one of us has to do it because we'll just go in order of our Brady Bunch screen.
Yeah. So I can do this.
Okay.
So Ron, I have you on my on first. So why don't you go ahead?
Oh, okay. Thanks, Ellen. I'm Ronald Hobson, and I teach math at Sauk Valley Community College. I've never been in this group before, but I got an invite in my email, and I thought I'd come in and see what's going on. I do teach developmental math, so I do have skin in the game.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'm next, and my name is Ellen Field, and I teach mostly all developmental courses at Waubonsee Community College. That's what my full-time job is in, and I do teach a couple of transfer level courses, but you know, this is of interest to me, so I wanted to be part of this too. So, and Chris Riola.
Hi, I'm Chris Riola. I teach developmental math over at Moraine Valley Community College. And I'm also our program coordinator. So yeah, I have a skin in this game too.
Thank you. Catherine from ECC.
Yes, I'm Catherine Mouchon, like you said, from ECC. I teach a range of courses. Some of them are developmental, but we're really concerned and beginning to work on curriculum for how we're going to meet the House bill and work with our own in-house curriculum committee on that too, because there's just a lot of ideas right now.
Thank you. Kelly Phantom.
Hi, Kelly Phantom, Illinois Central College. And I teach developmental math and some liberal arts math.
Great. Thank you. Kara O'Brien.
Hello, I'm also from ICC. I'm with Kelly and Pat, and I do teach developmental and other stuff too. So.
Thank you. Michael, how do you say your last name? Caparula?
Caparula.
Caparula.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Mike Caparula from Kankakee Community College. I mostly teach transfer level, but I do teach one or two developmental ed. I'm the current past president at IMACC, and I am the chair of the legislative committee at IMACC, which has a role to play in this webinar.
Thank you. Ruth Fabro.
Hi, I'm Ruth Fabro, also from Kankakee Community College. I teach kind of half and half, developmental and transfer level, but mostly in the non-STEM area. And then I'm also the math lead at KCC.
Thank you. Roberta Christie.
Hi, I'm Roberta Christie, and I'm from Shawnee Community College, and we are down to 3 full-time math teachers. So we're in with the science, which our chair is a science person. So all the changes, basically all 3 of us work together on. We all teach everything.
Great. Kathy Almy.
Hi all. I think every name I know almost. But those of you that don't know me, I taught at Rock Valley College in Rockford, Illinois for a long time. And now I have my own business, Almy Education, and I still teach part-time at Rock Valley. The main thing I wanted to mention is you'll probably hear my voice at some point because I am knee deep in this with 10 colleges in Illinois that are part of, and like several of you are at those colleges in this project called Aspire that I'm working with Women Employed. Our group is providing some technical assistance. So we deal a lot with the law.
It's good to have you. Patrick Ward.
Hi, I'm at Illinois Central College with Kelly and Kara. Like we're all here. I teach pretty much everything as well. I think this semester I'm doing a pathways course and a differential equations course. So it's a bit of a dichotomy.
Great. Thank you. Kira Ryder.
Hi, I'm Kira Ryder. I'm at Kishwaukee College, and I teach developmental and gen ed math. I am like someone else. I teach primarily the non-STEM track, but that is through my own choice. So, and hi, friends.
Thanks, Kira. Natalie.
Hi, Natalie McGathy. I'm at Prairie State College. I teach developmental and college level, transfer level math. I'm your treasurer for IMACC, and I was just in a meeting with Kathy Almy a couple hours ago. So glad to be here.
Thanks. Connie McLean.
I'm Connie McLean from Blackhawk College in Moline, Illinois, and I'm the math department chair and working with Kathy in the Aspire group.
Thank you. Linda Blanco.
I'm Linda Blanco from Joliet Junior College. I'm a professor and math department chair.
Thanks. America.
America Masaris from Harper College. I'm the developmental math coordinator. I teach mostly developmental, some non-STEM co-rec courses, some STEM co-rec courses. And I'm also heading our work group on bringing Harper into compliance with the law. So.
Thank you. Evans Alexis.
Unmute, please.
Sorry. So first name is Evans, last name is Alexis. I teach math and computer science, and I also the Dev Ed coordinator at Malcolm X College.
Thank you.
Yes.
Frederick. Frederick, and I don't know how Siegel Touch. How do you say it? Okay.
I'm the math specialist for adult education at the City Colleges of Chicago system. So I teach the teachers and develop the curriculum. I'm also on the IMACC curriculum committee and have volunteered to try to help redo the articulation guide for developmental math.
Great.
Along with others. So don't panic.
Thank you. Peter Kay.
Unmute, please.
You might want to unmute. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Peter Kay. I teach at Carl Sandburg College, and I teach developmental math.
Thank you. Carol Anderson.
Hi, I'm Carol Anderson, and I teach at Rock Valley College.
Thank you. Yelda.
Hi, I'm Yelda Aydın-Malin from Harper College. I am in the same work group as America for getting our college compliant with this, what the law entails for us to do. I teach various courses in our college.
Thank you. James Morgan.
I'm James Morgan. I teach at Joliet Junior College with Linda Blanco.
Hey, James.
Thanks. Ted Jankowski.
Sorry, I was a little late today. I couldn't help it, but I teach at Wilbur Wright College in Chicago. I'm now the official math department developmental educational coordinator for our Dev Ed courses, and I'm teaching half of my load is teaching normal courses, algebra, calculus, but now I'm involved with Dev Ed, which is brand new for me.
Great. Thank you. Andrew Manshim.
Hi, everyone. I'm an instructor at Blackhawk College in Galveston, Illinois. I'm also working with Kathy and the Inspire group, and I teach developmental math and college level transfer math.
Thank you. Chris Apun.
Hi, I'm Chris Apun. I teach at Blackhawk College, so I'm in the same department as Connie and Andrew. As Connie mentioned, we are dealing with the Aspire project that Kathy was talking about. So I teach all over the place. For instance, this semester I have one developmental course, one of the co-requisite sections for the non-STEM gen ed, liberal arts math, and differential equations.
Great, thank you. I'm just going through and seeing, well, okay, Jeffrey Tripp, please.
Hi, I'm Jeff Tripp, and I teach all developmental math at Rock Valley College.
Wow. Thank you. Heather Foes. Is Heather here?
She's muted.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe we can go back to her. Chris Warden. Chris, I see you're unmuted, but I don't hear you.
Sorry, is that better?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Chris Warden from Women Employed. We are managing the Aspire project, which many of the folks on the line have mentioned. Kathy sent around a reminder for this meeting a couple of hours ago, and I am actually in the car right now, so I'm going to remute and just listen from this point forward.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Kathy or Amy Madden.
Hi, I'm Amy Madden from Moraine Valley Community College. Glad to be here.
Great, thanks. And did I miss anybody? I don't know if I missed anybody, so just unmute yourself if I did. Okay, well, welcome, and I'm going to let Mike go ahead and take over at this point.
All right, thanks, Ellen. It's great to see everyone. I especially want to give a shout out to Evans and Frederick and Ted to see people here from city colleges. IMACC could always use much better participation from city colleges. So thank you so much for everyone, but especially great to see those from city colleges. So why are we here? I think we need to start with a little bit of background of what happened, not just last spring and winter, but also a little bit of what happened 3 years ago too, because they both kind of worked together on this. If I can share my screen, is that okay?
Yeah. I
can do that. All right. So does everybody see this wonderful legislation, I guess, here? So yes. This is what is formerly known as House Bill 2170, which was signed into law last March. Don't remember the exact date, actually, by Governor Pritzker. It has come to be known as the Education and Workforce Equity Act. All right, and it's very long. It has lots of stuff in it, a lot of it for K-12. But some of it that obviously applies for us too. And that is mostly what concerns us, and what we're going to talk about today is in Article 100. And there's two parts to this, and I think we're going to be spending our time talking about the second part, but I do at least want to bring up the first part for those people who are kind of unaware of it, and that is the placement part. Okay, so you could read this. Hopefully, I'm not going to read through it, but basically what it's saying is that we have to use multiple measures of placement on or before May 1st of next year. Okay, but and they list these types, cumulative high school grade point averages, successful completion of transitional math courses, eventually transitional English courses, completion of appropriate developmental ed or introductory college level English or math at another accredited institution, and so forth. But what I want to, and a placement test, which is part B. But what I want to make sure you see is part C, and this is the new part. Okay, is that if a student qualifies for placement in an introductory college level math course using a single measure, no additional measures are needed. Okay, so what this means is, for example, if a student wants to place into, say, statistics, okay, M1902, according to the IAI code, And if their grade point average is appropriate to what your college sets, and I'm going to talk about that too, they do not need to take the placement exam. It's not required. Okay, you can't require them to take the placement exam if they get in on GPA only. So it's multiple measures using any single one of those measures. Now, what could those benchmarks actually be? Or what courses are we actually talking about? This goes back to what the ICCB approved back in 2018. All right, and that is what I have here. And by the way, I have linked both of these documents into the chat. Okay, so this is the recommendations of the ICCCAO and the ICCCSSO on placement methods and scores, which I will say that IMACC did sign off on this. Okay, back in 2018. And I think the most important part here is what is considered these introductory college level courses. Okay, and that is these 5: quantitative literacy, general education statistics, math for LED, general education mathematics, and elementary mathematics modeling. Okay, these are those courses. College algebra was on this list, and IMACC fought hard to get college algebra off of this list, and we were successful with that. Okay, calculus is not included on this. So this is something that we need to consider when we're talking about the second part of this DevEd reform. Okay, so that's kind of, oh, and by the way, on the second page, they talk about the recommended benchmarks to use for this. So for example, high school cumulative GPA of 3.0 or higher on a 4.0 scale with the successful completion of a 4th-year math course. That is talked about. So what between this and the law is saying that is if a student comes in with that cumulative GPA of 3.0 and they have successful completion of a 4th-year math course, they're automatically in a quant lit course, a stat course, okay, and so forth, without even taking a placement exam. All right. So that's what I want to talk about, the placement part. Does anyone want to add anything about the placement part before I talk about the DevEd reform part? Okay, great. That must mean I'm doing a good job.
Actually, Mike, I put
yes.
it in the chat, but back in 2018, that was when ICCB was still allowing both conjunctive and disjunctive use of the measures. That was left up to the discretion of the school district. And they even stated that multiple measures was 2. So if your school district wanted to take 2 from that list and make them the 2 that you use, and then decide whether to use them conjunctively or disjunctively, that was all allowed. Within the next couple of years, that all changed. And then it became the law that we see now.
Yeah, and what we're doing at KCC is with this law, we're actually doing a combination of both. Okay, so for the gateway courses, we are of course following the law where it's an or, okay, but with courses like college algebra, I do believe we're doing it as an and, okay, where you have to do the placement test, but if your GPA is at this level, we can accept a lower placement score to actually get into it. So we're doing it as an and for some of the courses that are not on this list, but definitely an or, the disjunctive for the courses that are on this list. Thank you. Good point, Linda. Very good point.
Michael, I have one question.
Yeah.
Concerning placement tests. Can't we require replacement tests if we don't use them for placement, but for research purposes?
I believe,
so
yes, you can. As long as you use, you probably should specifically say that somewhere so that ICCB will be aware of it, because we have had that talk too, because we like to use it for data collection on our students. Totally agree. Yes. Yes.
Right, and it could then, the next step would be, can it be used for advising, even though we don't prohibit a student from taking a course? We could make a recommendation based on that, because that wouldn't be prohibiting them from registering for a credit course.
I would say yes, as long as the student is fully aware of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Just want to point that out. Thanks.
And furthermore,
can I throw in one thing related to that? I'm sure some, like Natalie, I'm so sorry because you heard me say this morning, but I want to throw something out just to think about that. There's absolutely research. In fact, I was having that request this morning, so I'm putting together a giant list for everybody that I will send out. So when I say there's studies, there are. when students get a negative
Yes.
developmental math placement, up to 30% of them do not sign up they don't start college. So the idea that that placements are, very, very accurate and they're good for students, I totally get that there are places where they can be good, but they also, for students, if they start off and they have a really bad score, that does something, absolutely, they notice that and they think, oh, so you're saying I'm not ready for college. And we are already losing students because of that. So it's something to keep in mind. Is it worth it always to make all of them take a placement test? I get wanting to know where they're at, but there are some negatives to it. And also, it's not the gold standard we thought. They're not as accurate as we thought.
Kathy, I was also thinking of the higher end where we have a student who says, without a placement exam, I can go and take a non-STEM course. But it would be nice possibly for them not to be on a non-STEM track because they don't quite realize that so many careers that they may not think of as being STEM actually have an element of STEM in them. And if they did reasonably well, they might say, oh, you mean I would only need one course before I could then get on a track where I could be in healthcare or in business where otherwise I wouldn't be on that track. So it's not just the low end that I'm thinking of. I'm also thinking in terms of trying to encourage people into higher salaried careers.
I want to piggyback on that because there are students who, it depends on what you use for your placement test, but we're an IMACC school. And unfortunately, a lot of our advisors don't understand the power of that. We keep trying to tell them to use it, not just for research, which I think is great and admirable, and we should have data collection, but for diagnostic purposes. The student might advance higher than what they would have gotten in on their GPA. So that's one thing. If they don't take the test, they don't even get to find out that maybe instead of starting out in pre-calc 1, they can start out in trigonometry, let's say, because they take ALEKS. And this isn't like the old Compass test. They get to actually do their review modules, and there are students who've advanced through that. Or even if they're placing into a class, let's say with transitional math, they can see that there's some deficits, work on those things, because I see so many. What's really sad is not just the students that aren't enrolling, it's the students who've paid money and enrolled. And I got a complaint from one of them that I got it in writing, and she said that nobody cared about her prerequisites. Nobody cared if she was ready, and it looked like the college wanted just to take her $900. That's not the way it ought to be. They ought to be advised of their ability and said, you know what, guess what? You have the chance to work on these review modules before your class. So
one thing to echo with that, because I'm not going to disagree with you, Linda, on that. The thing to keep in mind with all of this is what is required and what is available. So it's not to say we can't make placement tests available. I'm working with schools, and right now they're still going to offer an occasional section of pre-algebra. It's what can be required.
No,
so you could absolutely, you could say, but like with GPA, you could start with GPA, and a lot of schools are doing this. They're saying, okay, if you don't like that GPA, then take the placement test, and then you can place higher if you believe that you can show that. But they're not always starting with that as the default.
We would like students to be able to take ALEKS as a diagnostic, regardless of whether they need it, because that way, if a student is placed in a college algebra, let's say, but let's say ALEKS places them in elementary algebra, that student may have a lot of potential, but they may have forgotten some things from, I don't know, middle of junior year to whenever it is that they decide to get around taking a math course with us. They review and they get a lot of that stuff. I had students in elementary algebra that nobody really pushed them to do the review, and they did the review while they were in my class, and they placed through intermediate algebra and into college algebra. And it wasn't because of what I was teaching them, it was because of the review modules. All of a sudden their high school math started coming back to them. And I think that's what we're denying them, that opportunity, if we don't, and that's why, I think if you want to say maybe not required for placement, but either required or strongly suggested for diagnostic purposes. Figure out where you are so you find out if you want to choose to do the review or not.
Which is different. I'm sorry, Mike, we're taking of it. What do you want us to talk about?
Sorry, can I just ask a quick question for the schools that want students to take the test as a diagnostic? How do you ensure that they're taking it seriously is not the right word, but how do you know that they're just not, well, this doesn't count for anything anyway, click, 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 click?
then they don't have to take it at all. I mean, if they're taking it because they also buy into that we've talked them into taking this for the diagnostic purposes. All we're trying to do is get advisors to stress upon the students the importance of this so that the student will see value in it. We have not made, there is nothing where it's in writing that says they have to do it, but we're trying to strongly suggest with our professional opinion, and we have good professional opinion, that this is.
No, I was kind of misinterpreting something you said.
No, sorry about that, Chris. Yeah.
The one thing I do want to mention is that Alex is wonderful with the module reviewing and then the ability to retake. Alex is expensive, and keep in mind there are many schools that are still using AccuPlacer. Neither of them are, well, there's no such thing as a 100% perfect placement exam.
Right.
But keep in mind that there are still many schools that are using AccuPlacer that just don't have that capability that Alex does. Also, remember, a number of our students don't take their placement test until like the Friday before classes start anyway. And so that becomes an issue too. I know a lot of schools are trying to get the seniors in high school to take it as they're still in high school, which is a great idea. But I think that is a topic for a different day. I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of where the law stands now, and what Linda put up in the chat really basically sums it up, is that now it's a requirement to use multiple measures, but they can get in on a single measure as opposed to using it conjunctively as multiple measures. Okay, the second part, and this won't take as long to talk about because it's pretty straightforward, and it's a few pages down from where I was just at. For some reason, I thought this was January 1st, 2022. I'm wrong, it's May 1st, 2022. I don't know why I thought it was January 1st, but anyway. Each community college shall submit to the ICCB its plan for scaling evidence-based DevEd reforms to maximize the probability, that's interesting wording, maximize the probability that a student will be placed in and successfully complete introductory college level math coursework within 2 semesters at the institution. Okay, and then I'm not going to go through all of the rest of this stuff. You can read that. Now, some people might disagree on this, and I'm curious what Kathy has to say on this, but I actually asked Melvin Harrison this, who is the, is he the Assistant Director of Academic Affairs? Is that his actual title? Yeah. At ICCB, on what courses are we talking about introductory college level math courses? And he was in agreement that it was these courses.
Correct.
Okay, not calculus, because I've had people freak out and say, how are they supposed to be in calculus 1 within 2 semesters if they're going into basic algebra? Okay, yeah, and it also doesn't apply to college algebra.
Correct.
All right,
and that's a big thing because
it's a huge thing.
It still does, because it did in the original drafts, and college algebra is one that a lot of colleges use multiple measures for. So going from what I know from Brian Durham and Melvin and Marcus, they would like colleges to use multiple measures in as many places as possible because there's overwhelming research that they are effective. That's the reason why we are not the only state that has a law. However, the whole idea of the and the or is a really big deal when you're talking about classes that require algebra. So the idea of doing disjunctive, the research has shown that is fine but they're always studying, this is what I always look at, what courses are you making these judgments from? And they're almost always non-STEM courses. So with gen ed math and stats and all of that, saying it's this or this or this or this is not usually an issue because students can do really well in those courses. College algebra, different thing altogether. So that's a great place to still use multiple measures, but maybe use them conjunctively and do something with like GPA. And some of the schools I'm working with, they have things like 4th year of math, or let's say if you come in with this GPA, you can start in the college algebra co-rec, but you can't start in the college algebra, the full version of it. But here's the big one I want everybody to be aware of that I kind of glossed over, and I don't want you to as well. Math for LEd. That is absolutely on this list. And to me, that one kind of doesn't fit on this list. But it is. And I'm actually trying to, Mike, I wonder if you can help me with something. I am trying to get the memo that was sent out from which state agency, I don't know, that came out in like 15 or 16 or 17 about how we all had to change our math for LEd and include college algebra and statistics with some topics. Does anybody have that original memo? Because I'm sure you know who would have it. Would be Kevin
I will
Hansen.
tell you, since I chair the IAI committee, we all just stand around and stare at each other wondering what these
I know, because I
are.
was on IAI with you at that
Yeah.
time.
And so
I
even
still
to
don't
this
know
day,
what
we're
people
not
come
sure.
up with that.
From what I remember, they wanted college algebra, and the universities wanted the colleges to take the community college to have the college algebra, but they wanted statistics to be taken at the university because they wanted like statistics for educators. It was like a statistics for educators course that where they would read, professional journals that dealt with education and to help them with the statistics. But I may be wrong. That's all that I remember. What's strange about the Dev Ed reform with the elementary education is that since we have to get them into that course within 2 semesters, the problem is if most of you realize it's a 2-semester course. Okay, so you have to take the first semester, which is not a college level course, it's not an IAI course, before you can even take the next semester. That is something we're all battling with. I've had a number of people asking me about it. Okay, but basically what I've been telling a lot of people about that kind of stuff is that if they're taking like a math lit course to get ready for their first semester of their math for LED, if everybody understands what I'm saying. So they would be like PMGE math lit, okay? That still gets them within 2 semesters of a college level course. It's just not, it's not math for LED. It would be in the quant lit statistics way. So it's like an advisor would tell the student, okay, that yes, you're still technically 1, 2, 3 semesters until you're in the IAI course for math for LED, but next semester you could take stats or quant lit and you could have that college level then. Okay, so it's like it gives the student the choice. And I have been telling a lot of people that with the math for LED, because it is kind of weird, but I don't know. I don't have an answer for it. And I don't think a lot of other people do yet on the math for LED, because that's a little bit unusual there.
It is. And I've done some research to figure out like, what are the universities doing? And from what I can see on most of the public university sites, they're just saying you have to take R2 math for LED courses and college algebra and stats. Some of them have made different versions of the college algebra or stats for LED, like ISU does more custom classes, but some of them are just saying you have to take all 4 courses. So the question for us is, how do we ensure, be compliant with this law and make sure that they have what they need to be able to go into like an intermediate or into a college algebra? So that's because they might have to take that if they, if they transfer to say Northern or whatever. So that's proving to be a pickle. And I did have a conversation with Marcus Brown at ICCB, and he's so nice. I love working with Marcus, but he didn't have any definitive answers for me. And I got the impression that this was one of those things that was made, it was an exchange with college algebra because it's IAI and college algebra isn't, and to kind of maybe do a little bit of appeasement because IMACC was worked up about college algebra, understandably so, but I don't think that was fully thought out.
Okay, before I hand this back to Ellen, I want to answer a couple questions from the chat. All right, and then I'm going to give it back to Ellen to take over. So Kelly asks, can we use successfully completed high school math courses as a part of placement in STEM math courses? You can technically do whatever you want at your college for college algebra because it's not an IAI course. You just have to realize that if you want to do that for Calculus 1 or for business calculus or the IAI courses, you still have to follow those prerequisites that are outlined by IAI, intermediate algebra, college algebra, geometry, and so forth. Okay. Now, and then Amy brings up, so I will mention again, college algebra is not on this list for this Dev Ed reform. Okay, so according to my understanding, and it seems like Kathy's as well, is that college algebra is not on this list. So it is not required to maximize the probability of a student getting into college algebra within 2 semesters. That is not on the list. That does not mean I would not push to recommend trying to do Dev Ed reform to do that anyway. We are starting to do that at KCC, and I think a lot of you are doing that. College of Lake County is doing amazing things with college algebra, okay? But it's not required for college algebra.
So just to clarify then, so if a student, so like right now, we're most likely going to be paring down and doing away with our like arithmetic-based course. But if we had a 2-course sequence for intro and intermediate algebra, that would still be okay if a student spent 2 semesters in Dev Ed if college algebra was their next course after intermediate. In other words, if they're going STEM.
According to the law, yes.
Okay.
Now, but keep in mind, though, if they're in, well, I assume they can get into statistics or quant lit after basic algebra.
We have the PMGE course.
You have
for,
the PMGE
so
course.
again, we're probably going to get rid of the arithmetic course. So if a student is coming in, they would most likely take our PMGE course. That's their 1 Dev Ed course. And then they would be eligible for Gen Ed Math or
Gotcha.
Gen Ed Stat after that course.
But
I guess it's the STEM pathway that we're really fumbling over, because I'm trying to, again, like we were chit-chatting before the meeting started, I'm picturing consolidating basically 8 credit hours worth of material into a 5 credit hour 1 semester course, and I'm just seeing that being an unmitigated disaster. But I'm trying to figure out if there's other ways to do that. But if I'm kind of making sure like how we're interpreting the law is how it's actually written, because that's going to dictate how we do a lot of our work on campus. So.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep. Ellen, I'm going to pass it over to you now.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I have a poll that I'm going to launch, and it just has 3 questions. If you could fill it out, and I'll give you we'll talk about the results after people have filled it out. So Kira had her hand raised before. Did you
hold on? I think the poll you gave the results.
Oh.
Did you give the results of the poll? Or
Mine
do you
looks
actually have
right.
the poll? Okay. I must be because I'm a co-host. Never mind.
Mine looks
I'll
right.
shut up. Okay, I'll shut up. I'm going to shut up.
That's okay. So Kira, did you have your hand raised?
I did, but I think my question was answered. So I'm going to hold off for now. Thank you, Ellen.
Okay. So I'd like to ask people how their colleges are responding to the legislation, what's in the works. And if you could just raise your hand or put something in the chat, and we can have you unmute and talk to us about it. So Chris Riola, you said our administration is not sure that 2 courses fit the law. What do you mean by that?
I guess I kind of meant like replying to Fred's question. I guess like kind of offering, say, intro algebra in the first 8 weeks and intermediate algebra in the second 8 weeks. I'm not sure if they thought that was within what we were allowed to do, because it seems that some of our people in charge are really interpreting this that the STEM pathway had to be was limited to 1 semester also. So I'm really trying to get a handle on exactly what's required on our end, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, of course, that's
But
an
I do like
interesting issue.
because I still like the idea of doing 2 courses in 8 weeks, because I mean 1 8-week course followed by another 8-week course, because the reality is that's how we teach them in the summer anyway.
Right,
Yeah.
IMACC curriculum guide already approves of the algebra, intermediate algebra. The advantage of making them separate courses is that someone isn't committed if they've done poorly in the first 8 weeks. They haven't spent the tuition for the second 8 weeks. So it's actually more student friendly.
Yeah, and then in theory, I guess if they didn't do well in intro algebra in the first 8 weeks, we would have a second 8-week intro algebra that they could take
Exactly.
again. Yeah. So, I mean, and then there's just a lot of like, goofy, like, how our teaching load as faculty work with that. That's like definitely something that's not for this room, but there's a lot of stuff that we would have to work through to make that work. But I mean, I always like that option anyway.
Ellen, could I ask a question before you bring this
Yeah.
up? I'm kind of confused about the verbiage they use for that increased probability. From what Michael mentioned earlier, they already have increased probability in so many of our schools to go into a correct stat or correct gen ed math. Then why do we have to worry about college algebra, even elementary math for elementary as teachers? They have a probability to go into a college course. If they're not choosing and they want to go to another route, then they have to satisfy the requirements of that route.
I know that's a really good question. I'm not sure exactly what they mean by that either. Kathy Almy?
I can speak to that. That's actually, I originally thought that they came up with that. I don't think they did. It's in multiple other states' legislation. So I don't know if California was the first one to come up with that with AB 705, but that was their law. And then Colorado has a mandate. It uses the same language, but it's not a law. But that maximized the probability that they will complete within 2 semesters. That's just, I think, around that other states are using.
Some of the earlier drafts, if some of you may have remembered seeing this, some of the earlier drafts of this House bill started, it was a scaled percentage. It started like at 1 year, it had to be 50%. The next year, it had to be 75%. And then by like year 4, 100% of your students must be in a college level class within 2 semesters. Fortunately, that all got taken out. And I think it did get changed into this umbrella term of maximize the probability, which is very ambiguous. But I think, Yelda, I think that's good for us, that is the wording. Okay. Mm-hmm. What I believe, and I think Kathy would agree with this, the whole reason for the law is just to mandate what a lot of us are already doing. Okay, a lot of us are already doing this. They're just requiring that we all do it. We all have multiple measures for placement. We all are doing dev ed reforms. I think a lot of us have been doing this for years anyway, with with Complete College America and the co-requisite movement, to PMGE, to other things I can't think of off the top of my head. There are a lot of them, summer bridge programs that led to transitional math. Okay, we have been doing a lot of this already, which that goes into that Senate resolution that people were in this committee talking about what we were all already doing, and that what came out of that is in this bill as well. Like, I think a lot of us have been doing this already. They're just sort of making it required.
Okay, so here's the issue. So I want to give you, so this is what, because it's funny, like I would have agreed with everything you said, but this is what I've noticed in actually working with colleges. Okay, so, and this was a new learning for me as well. The thing to look at is, and you should all do this for your colleges, is go look at how many sections of arithmetic, pre-algebra, and beginning algebra are you still offering. That's what they're not happy with, and that's the issue. I bet every college here has a co-rec or has one on the books, if they haven't even offered it yet, but they have it. That's not the issue. It's not creating it stuff, is that most of the stuff is not at scale. So scale means the default is that a student is either in a college level course or they're in a co-rec, and they're only in dev ed in some minor cases. And if you want to see what scale is, go look at Lewis and Clark. They are at scale. And so that is what they want to see, because that's what will actually move the needle. As long as we have just like a section of co-rec, you're still going to have most students sign up for beginning algebra. Even if it's not the right thing, it's just what they know, and it's what counselors know. And that's what they want to see you get out of, because, and Brian has said that, Marcus and Melvin, they want people to get out of the pilot phase, because we're all in this pilot. We have a section, blah, blah, blah. That's not what they want. It's scale. And then one other thing, I want to throw one other thing, because, I want to throw this out because it came up, and I do not want Illinois for this to happen. So again, I apologize to the Aspire people. We don't want to become California. Okay. So California had AB 705 come out. The faculty were extremely upset. It was really rushed. They didn't have any say. It was basically like our SJR 41, and that you just had to do it. And they were very, very, very upset. The faculty did not go all in with it in terms of the spirit of the law. This summer, there was an article that came out. It was publicly in all the ed, like legend. I can find the article. I can share it with you. The chancellor's office at the California Community College just said, you didn't do what we told you to do, and now we're going to make you do it again. And they're called out 78 colleges out of their 120 some odd. And they said, you didn't really do this in the spirit intended. So they're going to do more legislation. They called them out publicly and they said, now you're going to do it again the way we said. It's contentious and there's a lot of animosity. So my request to everyone is please try to look with the open mind that like, we don't have 100% that have to be incorrect. We have maximized probability. We have things like that. ICCB is super reasonable about a lot of this stuff. Please try to go in with this and do it also for college algebra in some way, because they want to see actual change at scale. They do not want you to put a toe in. Kira, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, you said look at what you have for arithmetic, beginning algebra, elementary algebra, those kind of classes. Right now, our lowest class that we offer is the math literacy class, the PMGE. So that still sort of looked down upon?
No, I think that's fine. And I'm not saying that because I wrote a book for it. So
no, I know.
But I think that's the whole thing is it doesn't matter what the one semester is. They just want to see one semester max before a student is in college level. So that could be an Emporium, that could be Pathways, that could be a combined course, but they just want to see one semester.
So, okay, let me just ask this. So right now what we have is students come in, the lowest class they could get placed in is that math lit class. That's one semester. From there, they can take college level math or statistics. Is that complying at this point?
It is.
Now,
if your students are super low, you could do some kind of bridge program. A lot of you use ALEX PPL, which is outstanding. You can use that as a bridge for your very, very lowest that might need to take college algebra. But one of the things I would encourage you to do is try to push your IR people, institutional research, and see if they can get more information on who of your students actually take college algebra. Most of those students do not place into pre-algebra to start.
Right.
They're not your lowest students.
Well, and again, so when I had my hand up earlier, that was the question. It stemmed from our misunderstanding that students had a place into college algebra or be finished with college algebra within 1 year, which it sounds like is a misconception, but might be a down the road reality.
I think they'd like to see it. That's what they originally had, but they removed it for political reasons.
Okay, so, but right now students have, so that was the question, is students have an option. They can come to our institution. They can take the math lit and then the statistics or the math lit and the college topics in math kind of thing, gen ed math. They can get done with their math requirement in 1 year, but if they choose to go STEM and they're low, they have deficiencies, that it might take more than a year. Again, we're not trying to like bend the law, but is that still, they have an option to get that? It's just if they choose to go the other route, it's going to take more than 2 semesters.
Yeah, and I think that's okay. And I remember Marcus saying to me, like, he gets that we will never be able to get 100% of the students through that are even impacted by this in 2 semesters. They understand that there's going to be some odd cases out where they're not able to. They just want to see it for the vast majority.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm going to share the results of the poll, and can you see them? Can you see the results? Does anybody see them?
Yes, I can see them, Ellen.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ron.
Sure.
So, okay, so it looks like 96% of you are making plans for DevEd reform, okay, in response to the legislation. So only, 4% or 1 of you said no.
I think I was the no, and it's just because none of our reforms have been in response to this legislation. Most of them have been in place for like 3, 4, 5 years already.
Okay, thank you.
You haven't started, you're done.
Yeah. Okay, and so different ways that we're responding to the legislation: co-rec classes, highest percentage, 84%, and improved placement measures, 44%. And you can see them. And then the type of co-rec classes I was curious about, mostly it's statistics, and that actually aligns with at Wabansi, we're doing most of these. I mean, we're not doing co-rec classes for Dev Ed. Can I ask those people who have said something about having co-rec classes for Dev Ed, what do you mean by that?
For me, it means I misunderstood the question. And so the Dev Ed class would be part of the co-rec. So I guess that's what I meant, is that the developmental ed classes would change to become essentially a co-rec for a college level.
Okay, so that's another good question, because what we're doing for co-recs is it's basically an extra credit hour. So students would take, we've changed our elementary and intermediate algebra classes so that it will be covered in one semester. And then students will take the next semester, and if they need to, they will have a co-rec with it, which is, just-in-time remediation for that 100 level class. So are there other types of co-recs? Because it sounds like, Kira, you're talking about a different type of co-rec.
Yeah, I can comment on that. I'm working on developing kind of a co-rec for Math Lit. So it's an extra hour of just-in-time remediation for those who would normally go into pre-algebra. And so we would actually get rid of our pre-algebra course, and anyone that tests that low would take this extra credit hour.
Oh, interesting. So you must.
I can add to it a little bit. So at my school, we offer a class called Math 118.
Mm-hmm.
Math 118, a lot of our students, they didn't do well on Math 99, 98. So this particular class is for 6 credit hours. Math 118 is 4 credit hours, and Math 18, we call it, is just for 2 credit hours. So we combine all of those classes that they miss. So we combine all of those together. So we make Math 118, which is a college level for the student for them to graduate.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Roberta, you have your hand raised?
I have my hand raised. So one of the things we're doing is, instead of our intro to algebra class that's normally being taught, the plan is to have the Alex placement and a tutor in the room. So the structure would be that what we think is that they'll go to like an arranged time and work with a tutor on individual like computer labs, and instead of having a regular class.
Okay, great. Thank you. America, did you have your hand raised? Do you have your?
Yeah, we actually have 2 different co-rec model structures for the different classes that we do. For our Gen Ed math, our co-rec structure is essentially that's for quantitative literacy and also for elementary statistics. Our co-rec is an extra hour added on to the week. That's includes some like direct instruction in math topics that they might need in the coming week, but a lot of it is just extra support, right? So it's a tutorial session, typically, especially in my Quant Lit. My co-rec students spend that hour working on the homework while I bother them. So the statistics has more actual instruction because they need to know a little bit more algebra than they do for the Quant Lit. But then for our college algebra co-rec, we've built a semester-long course that incorporates the material in intermediate and college algebra, and it's just highly integrated. And it's kind of the first half of the semester, they're taking intermediate algebra, and the second half of the semester, they're taking college algebra. But then it's not really that way, because there's a bunch of stuff in intermediate algebra where you stop in the middle of the sentence and then you finish the sentence next semester in college algebra. And we can do that continuously. So we like sat down with that course and built it kind of from the ground up to really kind of seamlessly and coherently present those topics.
Erica, do you have a course outline that we could see? Because College of Lake County has done something similar, and I've seen how they rearrange theirs. I'd love to see yours.
At the moment, everybody who's teaching it is kind of flying by the seat of their pants. We're still in pilot, but once I could certainly share my outline with you.
That'd be great, because I just like to see where are you putting things, because honestly, that's one of the biggest things I'm seeing schools that are trying is if they're going to create something combined, do combined intermediate college algebra, especially for students who find out they got their stats credit, but then they find out they need college algebra. You're integrating content that already integrates really well anyway, because there's so much overlap.
I love that course. I super duper love it. Actually, I feel like we kind of take them from, I know what a linear equation is, to actually I can do algebra now.
Whoops. So I saw a couple people in the chat. Linda Blanco, were you talking, could you go on a little further about what you're doing for your co-rec?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's mostly been during COVID. So I've had a lot of, started out with unproctored kind of stuff. So I'm not sure how good any data would be if I were collected, but I'm using a co-rec textbook, but teaching a regular course. It's not a co-rec course in college algebra. And I'm the only one doing it. I'm just trying it out. And what I like about the adaptive approach is the student gets hit with, review things on an as needed. So not everybody does the same just-in-time review. It's like if the student needs it, it's put into their plan. And I will say this, you see them coming in with whatever deficits they may have. And even students that I would have had, like where I would had typically students just either drop or fail, they stick it out, and they even let's say they earn a D, they would have either had an F or a low F before. They're filling in a lot of the gaps, and I think that's a good thing. They seem to be learning a lot. So for what it's worth.
Thanks. I do want to be respectful of people's time, and it's 4:00. So if you would like to leave, that's fine. I understand. But if there's still more people who are interested in discussing this, we can continue. So
can I step in for a second?
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear someone who's had a very successful developmental reform getting into statistics. I'm curious about that one, about any co-rec you're doing to get into statistics or bridge or whatever. If anyone wants to step up and gloat about their school. Wow, so it sounds like that's something that we all need to be doing.
Our co-rec statistics has success rates on par with our non-co-rec statistics.
And what are you doing for your co-rec statistics?
I can take that, America.
Yeah,
I teach co-rec quite a bit, statistics, and what we do is it is kind of a discussion session, but throughout the supporting it as a statistic, as a discussion session. But in the discussion session, more of the mathematical tools that they need is emphasized in the problems that are picked. Everyone is doing their own thing, but mostly what I have observed, people who are doing similar things to me, I mean, they do, quite a few of us are approaching it from because we tried first just doing algebra, the algebraic tools, and teaching those concepts, it didn't go well. Students couldn't make the connections and weren't able to really utilize it when they needed it. When we started approaching it as a discussion session, like you would in a calc class or something like that, where they will be solving those problems and where mathematical constructs are also introduced along, then they started doing much better. I mean, better in the sense what America said, as well as the ones who are not in the correct section.
Mike, were you asking what content they do and what content people are using in the correct stats? Oh, you're muted.
Or yeah, or possibly just what their actual framework is and how they're getting students into statistics. So I'm trying to drive the conversation back to the law, because I know we could speak about college algebra. We could talk about that for 2.5 days. And I'm trying to drive it back to those gateway courses. And I'm just curious of those people who have had success getting students that weren't quite, that aren't quite ready for statistics into some sort of a whatever a program they have to co-rec or whatever just in time, kind of like what was spoken about going on at Harper. That's kind of what I'm asking.
And I was at a conference, statistics conference this summer, and there was one school from Texas, if I remember, that they have really enormously successful passing rate in statistics, that they increase, especially students of color. They have really good results in their correct model. I will try to unearth their demonstration. It was in some video link that I got, and I'll be happy to share with this group.
I think the big shift is moving away from the idea that it's like we're tagging on beginning algebra or intermediate algebra to stats. And just like what someone else said, it's like it's a stats course, and I mean, some of you went to NIU with me, so like we had recitation sections. It's not a recitation, it's a teacher, but it's that you are addressing what they need just in time related to content directly that they're doing. And from everything when I talk to people that are teaching co-recs, they always say you flex every week based on what students need. So a lot of people don't have like really hard and fast outlines of content because they try to adapt to student needs.
And actually, Michael, the person I mentioned who gave the talk in the STAT conference, they are not doing any assessment. The students are themselves choosing to assess into that correct session. They thought that they will not have any students coming into those sessions when they remove all the placement numbers, everything, but they're now coming in huge numbers because it has been widely successful, and the students were all encouraging each other because they're getting a lot up from it. That's what the presenter mentioned.
I think before I started talking, Evans was going to mention something. I think I may have cut. No? Okay.
So Ted, you mentioned how you had a co-rec course for college algebra and you stopped it.
Yeah, unfortunately, we did offer the co-rec college algebra for about a year. This was like 6 or 7 years ago when we first began co-recs. And we offered it for a year, and then we looked at the subsequent success of students going into higher level math, like calculus or whatever they were taking it, and they pretty much failed miserably. So we thought that was too much, offering 2 semesters of algebra and trying to get them to learn that all in 1 semester. And they, although some of them passed, they didn't really retain it. But we do have successful Gen Ed math, as Evans was mentioning, 118 as our college general education math co-rec. That's been working really well. It's a 6-hour course. It's 4 hours, the regular Gen Ed math course, plus 2 more hours of a co-rec math, basic math, just in time component. And then we have 125, that's the stats the stats co-rec, which is the same model, the actual standard 125 course, stats course with 2 hours of just-in-time algebra or whatever you need. And again, those courses, like I think someone would just mention, you have to like really have a lot of TLC with the students and adapt as you go from week to week to see how much they need as far as their co-rec. So, but they've been working really well. And has anyone had this similar issue with the college algebra co-rec that we had? Are students actually retaining?
So Ted, Kathy Almy asked in the chat, is this a co-rec that you included the intermediate and college algebra with?
Yes, we combined intermediate algebra with
What I'm trying to get at is,
algebra.
was it a co-rec, like a 3+2, or was it a combined one class that was 5 hours?
It was one class for 7 hours.
Oh my
6
God.
hours. 6 hours.
6 hours.
Six?
Yeah,
I thought it was
6 hours.
but it was insane. It was intense. The students that did pass, they passed, but I think it was just short-term memory, and we don't think that they learned what they should have learned. How about anyone else? Do they have similar experiences, or are you looking at what happens to students after these courses?
Professor Ted, when you teach your class, do you have a different professor teaching math 18 or 118?
It's together.
Okay, very good. Okay.
Now, no, go ahead.
Ted brought something up though, and Kathy, maybe you know more about this than I do, because I don't look into the law that much. But are the colleges required to follow up with data on the success rates of our DevEd reforms? I assume.
You betcha.
Yeah,
but,
I think.
But here's the thing, and this is actually good because I got really worried about this summer. I'm like, oh my God, because I've worked with so many schools with just transitional math trying to accept portability codes and how much of a pain in the arse, pardon my French, that is. I'm like, how are we doing this data collection? Because there's so much that people need to collect. ICCB came up with a whole additional list of metrics that went out to your IR departments that have to be added to an existing report they already turn in. So the idea is your IR department should be taking care of the compliance part. Okay, so basically one of the things your IR department has to do is complete an A1 every year, which is this giant spreadsheet, a row for every student and a bunch of columns with a bunch of metrics. ICCB had them add like literally 20 additional columns with more metrics so that they can measure, like, they do well in a contextualized course, they do well in a compressed course, all that stuff. That's great, but that doesn't give you the information you need on your campus. So you're still going to have to push your IR people to pull data that you guys can actually use and make decisions. So that would be my suggestion.
Thanks. So I want to respond to Kira Ryder. You were asking, this is a question we're wondering too at Waubonsie. Is anybody doing a co-rec as a separate course, not attached to the transfer course or whatever courses?
It kind of defeats the purpose, doesn't it? I mean, the whole point is just in time fixing, because the old models don't work because they don't retain anything, right? I mean, isn't that the whole point of having a co-rec, that it's attached and fill them in as they go?
I'm really interested in this because we're so small. We don't have probably enough students to create a course just for the ones that need the co-rec. And so I was thinking, well, we would do a mixture of co-rec and non-co-rec, and then just have this 1 credit hour for those from several sections doing the co-rec. And so that would mean that all the sections would kind of have to follow the same timeline pretty closely to get this just in time. But I don't think we could make it, the combined course.
So the way that we initially did our co-recs, we've changed this since COVID, since everything's online. But the way that we initially did our co-rec sections was Our classrooms during the normal class sessions were a mix of college-ready students and co-rec students. And then only the co-rec students came to an additional meeting, and there were maybe a dozen students in the room at the time. Right, so the co-rec itself was a very small class.
Ours is the same way.
But it was still taught by the same instructor.
Right.
And so from the point of view of the co-requisite student, they came to class for an extra hour every week. They had the same teacher and half their class wasn't there.
Well, especially since we all know that the teaching styles and what you test on or how you test can vary so wildly, right? I mean, so you'd really have to have your teachers synced up if they were gonna collect them for different sections.
Where that could work is if you had one teacher doing both sections, and then they had both of their co-rec students in one co-rec section. But I think it is so difficult to come up with the level of communication and to make that happen. It's not impossible.
Go ahead.
I was just to say, it's not impossible, Ruth. There's a way to do it. I just think it's,
If I may comment, one of the weaknesses of the co-rec is that mathematics tends to have an ordering of objectives. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we have the objectives for the credit class, the prerequisites covered beforehand, but that's normally done in another class. And so if there are a substantial number of prerequisites, it's hard to have covered those in a co-rec that's being taught on the same schedule. And so that's just an inherent weakness that in times might point to instead having modular courses where you break it down and so that you have the first 8 weeks be the course that they really needed before they got there, and then the second 8 weeks be the actual course. As someone had commented, well, we do this over the summer, so it has a possibility of working.
Except for like gen ed, I mean, the gen ed math, I mean, really prerequisites? Come on, am I the only one here that thinks gen ed math should be kind of fun? I mean, like some graph theories, do some project-based stuff. I mean, I basically want them to leave and not hate math for the rest of their lives and spread it to their families. I mean, because it's terminal. I mean, really, I'm not going to be looking up from the operating table saying, they didn't quite have the amortization formula down in their calculator because they didn't use the right number of parentheses. It's like, seriously.
Patrick, my doctors say that.
I hope they went STEM.
My doctors say that about calculus.
Right.
I think it's all relative.
Well, there's a certain level of problem solving skills you want them to have, though, still, right?
Yeah, we're talking about the bottom students. How are we going to get them to even enjoy what you're talking about if they just kind of look at you, what? So you kind of have to, and that's why the just-in-time really works better with the gen ed math as opposed to, the STEM, where you have to have all those prereqs ahead of time. That just-in-time works pretty well.
And I'm kind of picturing, I don't have any experience. We haven't done any co-requisite type models. We've got a couple that we're kind of floating around, but we haven't really done anything formal. But it kind of seems to me, though, that the student that's sitting in a co-rec class knew it at one time, but maybe forgot it. So you might be doing just more or less a review. I'm not necessarily picturing somebody seeing that prerequisite for the first time, that prerequisite content for the first time, sitting in a co-rec class. But maybe I'm off on that, but I'm just kind of thinking that it seems that the student in a co-rec class would have seen that material before and maybe just, oops, I forgot where to put the parentheses in the amortization formula type thing or something like that. But
a lot of our Quantlit students have seen it before and they've repeatedly not understood it. And actually having an application in front of them is actually really helpful in getting them to understand it. And also, to a really great extent, the difference between a student who places at like the intermediate algebra level and the college algebra level doesn't have anything to do with topics that they may or may not have seen. It doesn't have anything to do with, oh, well, these two students are exactly the same, except that this one didn't take a class where they found the inverse of a rational function, right? It's a level of, it's really a question of mathematical sophistication. And so like the student that's completed intermediate algebra is going to do much better in a quantitative literacy class than the student who hasn't, not because they needed the material in the intermediate algebra class, but just because the same factors that are causing them to fail quant lit would have caused them to fail the intermediate algebra. And so the big thing that changed in our quant lit when we went to a co-rec model is that suddenly all the students who couldn't pass intermediate algebra were in it. And we had to work with those students in co-rec, but they also all did much better in intermediate algebra or in quant lit than they did in intermediate algebra. There was an enormous loud popping sound as students who had been taking intermediate algebra over and over again for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 semesters went to quant lit and graduated.
You're right. Yeah.
Kathy, I have a question for you. You mentioned earlier that that the schools are already given certain measures that they will be utilizing to report our placement and success. Is that a correct statement? Do I recall
Right.
what
Your
you meant?
institutional research has things a part of their compliance that they have to report it.
Okay, are any of those does any of those metrics include, for example, how our transfer students might be failing in the other institutions that are that they transfer to, like that, those numbers? Because one of the things I wasn't,
that's hard to track. That's the problem with that. When you go across colleges,
yeah,
there's a lot of metrics, but I don't know if that's included.
I was in a lot of this kind of discussions in California schools, and a lot of the California state universities UC system was saying, number one problem we have with our transfer students is they're failing in big numbers, and we are not sure how to, get them up par with the rest of them and graduate them like we would like to. And so we are not only answerable to this bill, but also people that we're, transferring these students to.
Well, and keep in mind, this is something that's different than the PWR Act. A lot of you, like Mike, you've worked on this for a long time. PWR only mandated to community colleges. Universities were just encouraged to accept transitional math. This law, this DevEd law, impacts the universities too. So imagine how you feel, imagine how they feel. They haven't had anything like this before. So.
Okay.
Ellen, should we wrap up?
Yep.
Since we're getting into people's dinners time. All I want to say is thank you everyone for coming out. I hope I see some of you in Phoenix next week. If not, letting you know, we're still hopefully having a live IMACC conference at Allerton next spring. So that's still in the plan. So we definitely hope we see you then. Ellen, last ones from you.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for attending. I appreciate everyone's input.